Hello and welcome to Fowl Plays, where we look at tales of tabletop tragedy that are sure to ruffle some feathers. I'm your host, BossGoose, and in today's story we have a player who's new to the tabletop scene and joins a friend's game. However, they quickly become a problem as they immediately get intoxicated, obnoxiously talk over the rest of the players, and make everyone else feel uncomfortable with sexual remarks and threatening behaviors. Trigger warning for sexual assault. Before we get started though, grab that D20 because after retrieving the ruby pendant from behind a painting, we've come face to face with the ghostly form of a beautiful woman. She begins to move closer, hands reaching towards the pendant, and the temperature in the room begins to dramatically drop. She hasn't attacked yet, but we can't stay here long, so you need to decide what to do. You can either make an Arcana check to examine the engravings on the pendant and try to use it against her, or use your powers to dispatch the entity with an attack roll. If your last character was a wizard or a psionic, then take the respective rolls with advantage, and we'll see how it goes in 3, 2, 1. And if you rolled 14 or higher on your Arcana check, then you were able to ascertain the life-stealing nature of the pendant that the ghost has been feeding on. And with a short ritual, we're able to sever her tether to the mortal realm. Alternatively, if you chose to attack and rolled higher than a 16, then you were able to blast the entity away, causing it to dissipate after the final blow. On the other hand, if you failed either of these rolls, then the ghost relentlessly attacks. The only hope for you to escape now is to hit that subscribe button. Not only will it drive off the hostile spirit with its radiant aura, but it'll keep you updated whenever new content is available on my channel and provide easy access to hours of existing content that'll keep you entertained. Now, without any further delays, it's time to take your seats and wet your beaks as we dive on into today's tale. So, the context is as follows. In early 2020, just before the pandemic, a friend from college who I've been in a game with recently wanted to try his hand at DMing, with his own D&D 5e homebrew setting that was kinda like a high fantasy version of the Wild West. He started a session with me as a tiefling warlock and 3 other friends as a Kalashtar druid, gnome artificer, and tabaxi monk. We enjoyed the first session, and DM told me he was thinking of adding some other people. One of those people was a good friend of mine, Mouse, and the other was a friend from another circle who wanted to try D&D. This man will be called Richard because of what it abbreviates to. So, Session 2 begins, and the party is sent to settle a property dispute between a farmer family and a large crime syndicate that my warlock had gotten roped into working with. On our way to the farmer's house, we were surrounded by a local gang of bandits who demanded we stick 'em up and hand over anything of value. Meanwhile, in the next room over, Richard and Mouse were waiting for their cue to be introduced to the game. Mouse was just chilling and watching cartoons, but Richard was less patient, and downed a whole alcohol bottle and smoked a blunt before deciding he waited long enough. He pulled out a pocket knife and said he was either playing now or leaving, which scared Mouse into following along. They burst in about 5 minutes before DM was about to introduce them, with Richard talking over the DM about his intent to get revenge on the bandit captain for leaving him and his friend, Mouse's character, to die in a botched robbery. The DM shooed them back out to awkwardly finish their introduction himself, but then combat finally began. Combat, for the most part, was pretty fun. The enemies were spread out and there was a lot of cover to work with. Plus, Mouse's centaur gunslinger provided us with some much-needed tanking against the bandit captain. Then it came to Richard's turn. DM asks him what he wants to do, and he says, "I don't know, there's nothing on my sheet." He holds his character sheet up, and it's blank. This seems weird, since DM is the type to spend several hours one-on-one making people's characters with them, so he definitely took the time to make sure Richard had a character sheet made and ready. I ask him what race and class he's playing, and he says, "I don't know, some bird hooker." After an unnecessarily long pause, we find out that he was supposed to be playing a Kenku Soul Knife Rogue, and DM tells him he can look up the stats for that race and class while the rest of us take our turn. Now, this would be the first time he interrupted combat for something that should have been unnecessary, but it would certainly not be the last. Once he looks up what Kenku are, he says, "Wait, does this mean I have bird titties?" In the middle of someone else's turn. We try to get back to combat again, only for him to say, "Bro, I get to talk like Bumblebee?"
Holy shit, does that mean I can talk like that with telepathy?
And several other comments like that, all through combat. These comments would be bad enough already if he didn't loudly talk over the rest of us while we were mid-combat. And if some of the comments weren't suggesting that he was only teaming up with Mouse's character because he wanted to fuck her. And on top of that, he was drinking and smoking constantly throughout the entire session, having gone through almost an entire bottle of sake since he came in and smoked a whole blunt on top of that. We eventually managed to get him to stop smoking since we were indoors, but the alcohol did not stop, even a bit. Later, the time comes for Richard to show off his character in combat. And it turns out he pulled a completely broken homebrew out of his ass that was also called Soul Knife. Cue us having to then pause to effectively make his character sheet for him, since he basically refused to do it himself. He does eventually join, but now every turn of his involves him asking the same exact questions about combat. We explained to him last turn about literally every mechanic in the game. Also, now that he learned Soul Knife rogues had telepathy, he was broadcasting his obnoxious comments in character to all of our characters at all times. I text Mouse to see if I'm the only one finding this guy obnoxious, and she confirms he's getting on her nerves as well. Eventually, combat seems to be nearing an end. The bandit goons have all been killed or ran away, Mouse's gunslinger has their captain cornered, and Richard's rogue finished off the enemy he was fighting with a sliver of HP left. The druid tells his rogue to stay back so she can heal him, only for him to reply,
"No, I gotta finish off the captain myself. It's important that I molest his corpse because I'm a..."
Insert slur for intersex people that contains the word Aphrodite.
And we do that.
I immediately tell him that's not cool to say or do, and he responds with,
"Lol, shut the fuck up. I'm your TA, so you can't talk to me like that."
For what it's worth, he was a teacher's assistant in a class I took, but we barely even interacted then, let alone spoke. At this point, I'm just bewildered and almost at a loss for what to do, given telling him off was useless. Luckily, my turn came up next before he could do that, and I decided that if I couldn't stop him from trying to rape a corpse, I'd make sure he was unable to do so. I dropped Hex on the bandit captain and got a crit with Eldritch Blast, doing just enough damage to kill him myself. When asked how do you want to do this, I describe how the combination of necrotic and force damage vaporizes the captain on the spot, leaving nary a body left where he stood, and certainly not enough of a corpse for Richard to defile. Once combat was over, Richard's rogue walks right over to my warlock and throws his glove on the ground. Out of character, I didn't know this was a declaration of a duel to the death, but in character, my warlock wouldn't have cared anyway, so he walked off, only to get stabbed in the back and nearly killed. I was about to waste my last spell slot just to cast Shatter and drop him, when Mouse's gunslinger KOs him with a gun butt to the back of the head. Mouse then diffuses the situation by saying that she'll tell his rogue off for that, and Richard leaves in a drunken huff as the session continues. End of horror story. Well, Richard certainly lived up to his abbreviated namesake. For someone who wanted to try D&D and was lucky enough to be invited into a friend's game, he was incredibly obnoxious and didn't really seem interested in learning how the game worked. Now, that may be because he went overboard with the alcohol before he was even introduced in character, but this brings up another problem, that being the getting wasted itself. When you play a game like D&D, there's nothing wrong with having a few drinks and getting a buzz going while you're enjoying the experience with your friends, but getting smashed is counterproductive, and if you're an obnoxious drunk like Richard seemed to be, you're going to annoy the hell out of the other players, who are going to have to re-explain how to play and what's going on over and over again because you can't focus. Same thing with the weed. I'm not sure what DM's drug policy was, but smoking 2 whole blunts by yourself is gonna get you blazed. And combined with the alcohol, makes it incredibly difficult for you to follow what's going on in-game or filter yourself. Which is exactly what we see in this story. Through a combination of being inebriated and his own personality, Richard was extremely disruptive and obnoxious, and the thing with the pocket knife was needlessly threatening, even if there was no intention to use it. Another annoying aspect of this story was the character sheet. I have to imagine DM did go over the character creation with Richard, but he either forgot his sheet at home or never bothered filling it in the first place. If this was the case though, he really should have mentioned it before the game started or filled it in when he got there. Especially where he was waiting to be introduced, he had plenty of time to do this instead of getting drunk, and Mouse could have even helped him if he asked her. Speaking of Mouse, I don't know if this was in character or out of character, but the implication he was just helping her to get into her pants is pretty skeevy. But what really pissed me off was the implication about intersex people. Even if this was just some poor attempt at a joke, it's not cool to imply that someone is a molester just because they were born a certain way. It's both ignorant and harmful. Why some people think it's funny to grossly assault characters like this in-game is beyond me. Maybe to a certain audience it would be hilarious, but to me, it's disgusting and says a lot about you as a person. Luckily, this all only went on for the one session, and hopefully they never invited Richard back for a second. Anyway, thanks for checking out my video and sticking around till the end. I upload new content every week with some changes coming to my schedule in the near future, so stay tuned for that. And make sure you check out my channel for more D&D stories. And if you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave me a goosebump in the comments below. Your feedback and support is greatly appreciated. But until next time, be good players.